Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones. And we have an interesting show this week, Eddie. We've got a lot of hot topics to discuss, some controversies going on out there regarding the Ducks and all kinds of stuff. So we'll talk about the games, obviously, as we normally do. We've got a lot of fan questions to get to as well. Injury stuff, of course, that's a daily life for you if you're a Ducks fan, and we'll cover those as well. So looking at this last week, we had 5 games basically that we had previewed on the last podcast, and we had hoped that the Ducks would win 3 out of these 5 games. They ended up getting 5 points out of 10, which wasn't too bad, and they started off the week okay, and then from there it kind of went downhill. But they started last week playing Florida. As you remember, that was the Hockey Hall of Fame night. They had Teemu there. They had Korea there. They came out, did some Q&A before the game. They had a little video montage. Everything was, of course, fantastic for that. And, of course, the Ducks, they pulled this one out. They won this game 3-2, Eddie, against Florida, a team, that had haunted the Ducks before, that had, dropped 8 on them earlier in the season. But, the Ducks did give up a lot of shots. They gave up 52 in this game, which we all know has been a problem for the Ducks. But, Eddie, they were able to pull this one out by a 1-goal margin, and they did it on the Hall of Fame night.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how many times we said it this season, they did it on the back of John Gibson, because, without him in this game, there's no way the Ducks deserve to win this game. This is what, his second performance this season where he's had to make 50 saves. He's been unbelievable. And it's a shame that the Ducks continue to allow 50, over 40 shots at least almost every game. It feels like, at least. And they were able to scrape over a win in this one, and it actually had continued a pretty good run after they got a win against Boston as well, and things were starting to look up for the Ducks. And it was a good game. The top line performed well. Raquel had a goal, Perry had 2 assists, Montour and Manson chipped in for the other 2 goals, and it was a solid effort to hang on, but it really comes down to how well John Gibson played in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of been the theme the last couple of weeks. The Ducks are ranked basically last in the league in giving up goals against. They're right around 37 goals against per game. And like you said, it's been a difficult subject for them. They've had to rely on Gibson and then Miller. Of course, the Ducks didn't even have Miller in the beginning of this week. He was out for a little while. But they ended up pulling this one out. They got 2 more points. Like we said, we weren't sure if they'd win this one or not, given how they played against Florida recently, but they were able to do it. I think one of the other kind of the stories was more, I guess, before the game, Eddie, was, when they had Korea and Solani out there, the owners came out, and Henry Samueli talked about the Teemu banner, being lonely up there. And, he said he wasn't going to make any promises, but he talking about Korea and basically hinting that he was going to be up there. But I have to tell you, being there, a lot of people were really upset because a lot of people stood up because they thought, something was going to happen. They thought maybe there would be a banner going up for Korea, and it didn't happen that night, Eddie. And a lot of people weren't happy with the Henry Samueli and the way he, kind of alluded to it prior to the game.
Yeah, I think if he had opened with, I'm not going to make any promises, but, your banner looks a little bit lonely up there, I think that would have probably eased a lot of people's minds at that instance. But the way he leads into it, he says that it looks a little bit lonely up there. Then he just pauses for a good amount of time and lets the fan just go nuts. And it's never, no, I'm not making any promises, but we'll see what happens. I understand, and I was one of the people. I didn't expect there to be a secret banner raising, but I can understand why some people were mad, especially the people there. He definitely alludes to it and leaves the pause there, which I think is what frustrated a lot of people. So, he could have handled it a little bit better, but it definitely didn't spoil the night. I think most people, by the end of the night, especially with the Ducks win, got over it. So.
Yeah, and I guess the latest on that is basically Korea wants to see, people that won the Stanley Cup up there first, talking about like Scotty Niedermayer, Shea Shiger, stuff like that. But from what it sounds like with the owners, I mean, I think it's going to go through. It's just a matter of when. Part of the reason why Henry alluded to some of that stuff before the game too is that he, from what I heard, is that Korea still had certain doubts about how much the fans cared about him or would react to him. And obviously, for those of you that were at the game or you watched the stuff on TV, you could tell by all the cheering and everything that, pretty much everybody loves Korea still. And that, I don't know if he needed to do that, saying that whole thing. But like you said, good night. The Ducks win on Hockey Hall of Fame night. They pull out the 2 points. They edge Florida by 1. They then go into the back-to-back situation. They had to play San Jose the next night, and we talked about the whole goalie situation, what was going to happen. Miller was not ready to go, so Berra ended up going in this game. And this game ended up being a marathon game, basically. The Sharks scored first. The Ducks scored a couple goals. It looked like the Ducks might pull out a 2-1 win. They ended up giving up a goal in the third, which forced overtime. And then they go in a shootout, which they go 9 rounds, and they end up pulling this one out with Vermette getting the game-winning goal in the shootout. Pretty exciting night. I mean, the Ducks, again, they gave up 42 shots, like we talked about. They've given up between 40 and 50 shots, it seems like, regularly. But, pretty impressive. The Ducks won both these games back-to-back, and they had Berra in net. And obviously, the rest of the team has been depleted, as it has been, without Kessler, Eves, and that's just the way it's been lately, unfortunately. But they pulled it out, Eddie, and they got 2 more points and 4 points in 2 nights.
Yeah, it's another 1-goal game with the Sharks, which has been a trend for a couple seasons now. Pretty much every game between the Ducks and the Sharks seems to be a 1-goal game, and I think it was a strong effort on the second game of a back-to-back, which is always tough. Obviously, it didn't involve as much travel as you usually see. They were coming from Anaheim going to San Jose, so it wasn't as bad, but it still is tough playing 2 games back to back, and I think it was a solid effort. But you touched on the fact that the Ducks allowed 42 shots in this one, and they were able to scrape out with a 3-2 win. But as we see the trend continue on this week, you can only get lucky and scrape by so many times, and it was great to get the 2 points, especially against a Pacific Division rival, which is something we talked about on last podcast, referring to these games that the Ducks are playing a lot of Pacific Division teams this week, and getting the extra point against them is important. But at least right now, picking up those extra 2 points against the Sharks team who are close to the standings is pretty important.
Yeah, and like you said, the trend continued, and the luck ran out against Vegas. The Ducks gave up 49 shots to the Golden Knights in the next game. Gibson was back in net. He did all that he could do in this game. The Ducks actually scored, first. Manson scored. He's been getting some crazy goals lately. This one, he had one on Tamu night too, and we're like, what is going on with him? He's out there showing some moves and everything. We see Derek Grant gets a goal on the power play. The Ducks weren't playing well, but they were up 2-0. It seemed like they were going to pull this game out. Then Vegas gets a late goal at the end of the second period on a power play, and they carry that momentum into the third. They score 3 goals in the third. They end up winning this one 4-2, Eddie, out shooting the Ducks 49-19.
Yeah, and really they just skated the Ducks into the ground. It took its toll, and Marchessault gets the late goal in the second period. And then from there on, it was just it was all Vegas. They just dominated the third period, and the Ducks deserved to lose this game the way they played. 49-19 is ridiculous, but when you look at the way the game was played, the Ducks had no chance. Vegas was unbelievable, and their first. These 2 players specifically, William Karlsson, who we're all familiar with, and Jonathan Marchessault have been unbelievable for the Knights as of late. It was all James Neal to start the season, and now it's been these 2 guys as of lately. But it's tough. It's tough because this is a game we believed earlier last week that the Ducks could win. The Vegas had trailed off a bit from their early start, but it's tough. When you're up 2-0. You would hope that you can close it out. I think that late goal at the end of the second by Marchessault was really a catalyst for what came in the third period. But it's tough to win games when you get outshot 49-19.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. I think the turning point in this game was that goal by Marshall Shaw at the end of the second period. The Ducks were trying to hang on. They were shorthanded and they couldn't quite do it. And that gave Vegas life because Vegas had still played, well the first two periods and they were down 2-0. If there's a turning point in the game, definitely that would have been it right there. And the Ducks unfortunately dropped this one. We had talked about the games that they needed to win. We had hoped that they would win against San Jose, Vegas, and LA. They got it done against the Sharks, but not against the Golden Knights. So they ended up dropping this one. And then they go into their Black Friday game, which it's not against Chicago, so you would think it would be a good thing. But the Ducks, I don't know if they're going to cancel these games or what, but they dropped this one 4-1, Eddie. And it was really the first 5 minutes. The 5 minutes in the beginning of this game, the Ducks just, I don't know if they had too much stuffing left in them or turkey or what, but they basically give up 3 goals in 5 minutes. One of them is taken away. It's challenged for offsides. So the Ducks get that one back, which was the first goal in the game, which was literally the first 10, 15 seconds of the game. But they give up another goal 40 seconds into the game, and they give another one right before the 5-minute mark. So next thing you know, the Ducks are down 2-0 early in the first period. They get a goal from Boschman in the second, but after that, they added a couple more goals, and the Ducks ended up losing this one 4-1, Eddie. Just a bad start against the Jets on Black Friday.
Yeah, and this is a Jets team who are rolling, and again, referring to last week's podcast, we talked about how the fact that this is one of the hottest teams in the NHL right now, and they took advantage of the Ducks in this one. I mean, it was a very solid effort by the Jets in this one. The Ducks didn't really have anything going all night. Even Boschman's goal wasn't the best chance. It was really just a shot from the blue line that found its way into the net. But it's tough to look at what you can really blame it on. Obviously, you look at the injuries up front and guys who are filling in. You look at Derek Grant and how great he had been playing early on in the season, and everybody was raving about his play. And now lately, it seems like he's regressed and gone back to what we most likely would have expected from Derek Grant at the beginning of the season. He's been a passenger on a lot of his shifts, and there's a lot of times where he's just been watching the play and the other team ends up scoring, and it's disappointing. I mean, the injuries are finally starting to catch up. Guys aren't contributing as they were earlier on, and it's tough. And this is a very strong Jets team, and they really took it to the Ducks in this one.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, just having the lack of the players up there up front, it's hard. I mean, you look at the Ducks' top six, and I mean, there's only a couple guys in there that are really top six. I mean, obviously Perry's been up there, but he's not been scoring as much. You have Silverberg in there, who's scored a little bit here and there. Caggiano, I mean, he's kind of up there, but maybe not really. You know what I mean? I mean, he's more of a defensive player as of late. It's just rough. You look at the center position. I mean, you're going with Grant and Wagner as your top centers. I mean, come on, and then you got to have Raquel out there, which we find out just before the Kings game that he's hurt and he's out the next couple games. So the Ducks are minus him too. So all kinds of crazy stuff happens. Perry gets hit in this game. He has 20 stitches in the chin. From the Chirot butt end of his stick. That happened, towards the end of the second period. All mayhem kind of what happened in this game. I think that the thing that was unfortunate in there, Eddie, is that the Ducks did get a power play, and it was, they called, Scheifele, but, Chirot got nothing. He should have got a 5-minute major. Ducks were down 3-1 at that point. I'm not saying that they would have turned around and miraculously scored a couple goals and won, but it, could have at least helped the Ducks. And I just think it's unfortunate because a lot of people were pissed off, and of course all the Jets fans thought it was funny, as a lot of almost every fan of every other team thinks it's funny when Perry gets hit. I don't know why, because we all know if he was on their team that it wouldn't be that way. But that was kind of the big controversy, and then the league looked at it and they didn't do any suspension, which some people had said that wasn't a big surprise, but they only fined him $700. I mean, which is like nothing. So I don't know. What did you think as far as him not getting a penalty and not getting suspended for the whole incident?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there should have been a penalty on the play. It may have been that the ref missed it, and that's fair. But then usually you look for those things to be taken care of in a suspension, and in this case, it was taken care of in a small fine. But no, I definitely don't think it should have been a long suspension. It was a bad play. I think a 1-game suspension would have been fair, and again, the fact that they missed the penalty in the first place, you would look for something, at least some kind of retribution, some kind of suspension to take its place. But it's disappointing. It's not like he's a superstar player. Again, that shouldn't come into the decision making when doling out a suspension, but unfortunately, sometimes it does. So I think in this case, it really wouldn't have hurt, but it's unfortunate. Again, like you said, I don't think it would have turned the tides. I don't think the Ducks would have came back and won this game, but you never know. Anything can provide momentum in this game, and especially a 5-minute power play would have done the Ducks some good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they would have gotten at least a goal and been within one. I mean, who knows? But I mean, it's just unfortunate. You see that stuff happen. The Ducks are already down, all these injured players. We already know how it goes with a lot of the penalty calls, so that gets added to it. And then the Jets fans, I don't know what's wrong with them, because in the past it seemed like Jets fans weren't too bad. But now, when the fine came out against Sherratt, they actually set up a GoFundMe page to raise money for him. I mean, we're talking $3,700, people. I'm pretty sure he could afford that. So I don't know what's going on, but the Jets fans aren't really, I don't know, they're just not, high on my list, I guess. I used to think that they were okay, and there's some that I actually do have friends with that are decent, but I don't know. It just kind of irritated me that happened, and then you're going to do a GoFundMe page and think that it's funny. I don't know. I just thought it was uncalled for. Maybe that's just me taking a little bit too much of it, but it's $3,700. I mean, get over it. And he didn't even get called for anything, so, and they won the game. So I don't know. That's just how I feel, Eddie. I just thought that was a little bit much by the Jets fans.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I think anybody who plays the Ducks, most fans hate Corey Perry, and that's just the way he's played throughout his career, and the way he continues to play the game, and he plays on the edge, and I think like you said, most people would love to have him if he was on their team. The fact that he isn't, and he plays on the edge, and he does, at times he can play a little bit dirty, and he can do things that would piss me off if he was playing on the other team, and we've seen other players do that. Well, there's guys on the Kings, a lot of guys that we pretty much hate everybody on the Kings. So, and then if they were on our team, most of the time we would love to have them on our team. So it kind of goes both ways. In regards to the GoFundMe thing, I don't know if they were, really serious behind it. I think it was more so just a joke more than anything, because I think we all know, even Ben Sherratt, he doesn't make a ton of money, but I'm sure he could have paid a $3,700 fine. It just comes out of his paycheck at the end of the day. So I think maybe it's more of a joke more than anything, but I get where you're coming from. It is a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was a joke. I just thought it was a little bit over. I mean, it's just like they hate him. I think it was more they just hate Perry so much. Just like you said, everybody hates Perry, so they put it out there, and haha, we're gonna pay this fine because we don't care, and screw Perry, basically, for lack of a better term. But you mentioned the Kings, and that's who the Ducks then played after this, the second set of back-to-backs in this past week. And God, this game unfolded almost similarly to the other game. The Ducks scored first. They had a lead. It looked like they were going to win this game. The Kings score late. They go to overtime. The Ducks end up, losing this one in the shootout. Kind of unfortunate. A really wild first period. You saw Liambas, who shouldn't be in the NHL, quote unquote. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Courtesy of the Hockey News, but you see him take on McDermott. You remember McDermott is the one that took out Cassé the last time they played, so you kind of saw that coming. But the big fight, really, in the first period, is we saw Bieksa, and he does the Superman punch again. One punch, and the fight's over. We saw him do it against Gudas earlier in the season too. So, it looked like the Ducks were rolling. You see him knock out in his fight. The Ducks get a goal. They're up 1-0. And then the Ducks just can't hang on. The Kings pull the goalie. Dustin Brown gets a goal very, very late in the game. Ducks end up going to the shootout, and then unfortunately they lose in the shootout, Eddie. They did get a point, which is big. We were hoping the Ducks would get 6 points this week. They got 5. But they just couldn't quite pull it out against the Kings.
Yeah, and for Bieksa, I mean, he's gotten away with it twice now. You think the next time he tries it, somebody's going to get wise to the fact of what he's doing. But, yeah, I mean, it's great to see that edge from him. I mean, that's what we saw in the BX of old when he was back in his days with Vancouver. Obviously, it was a different type of hockey back then, and that was something we saw more often. But, from him, that's what you kind of expect from him now. You don't expect him to get on the score sheet. If he can get a fight every now and then actually win it in a way that's going to pump up the boys, then I'm all for it. But, yeah, I mean, when you look at, you talked about Mike Liambas, and obviously we're gonna get into that a little bit later on, but Randy refused to pretty much play his fourth line in this game. I think Liambas played 338 and Costner played 350, and Holzer I think was the last guy on that line, and he played 528, and it was really a 3-line game for the Ducks throughout this one, and It was a good effort. Again, it's coming off the back-to-back. They actually played solid in the second games of back-to-backs, which is surprising. They had a tough game against San Jose that they ended up grinding out in a shootout and winning, and almost getting the win in this one in a shootout. So, if anything, kudos to them for getting at least a point from these second games on back-to-backs this week.
Yeah, because going into this game, we found out that Berra was sent back down. Miller was finally deemed healthy. He, played in this game. And then we had the other bad news. We found out Raquel had an upper body injury. Still don't know what it is exactly. He didn't, play in this game. He ended up not playing also in the Chicago game that you all witnessed the devastation earlier tonight, or if you're listening to this the night before. But the Ducks still pulled it out without, Raquel, and like we said, Miller and net. So that's what happened in this game, and they ended up getting a point, which was good at least. But you just really wish they would have had those 2 points. They were so close. They're only, a minute and like 30 plus seconds away, Eddie, to pulling it out. I guess the good thing is the Ducks didn't give up 50 billion shots in this game. They gave up 34, but. Anytime you play the Kings, you want to get those 2 points and win, especially in regulation if you can, or if it goes to overtime. And, again, though, the Anaheim goals, as I call them, at least pulling out a point, and they pulled out 5 out of 10 in this past week, obviously excluding the Chicago game.
Yeah, and really, you talk about the forwards and the injuries, and I think, it's easy to look at that and say this is the reason the Ducks are doing bad. But I think at some point as well, the blue line has been healthy for the last few games, and at some point the blame has to come on these guys as well. I mean, this is arguably supposed to be one of the deepest and best young defense corps in the NHL, and they haven't been that great. The last few games. Some of the blame for the Ducks allowing so many shots on goal has to fall on these guys, not just the forwards. And yes, it's obviously tough to possess the puck often when your top two centers are Derek Grant and Chris Wagner. But again, it's not just the forwards. Eventually, some of the blame is going to come on this decor that's supposed to be 100% healthy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The defense, you would think with Fowler, Lindholm, and Vatanen back would be, good to go, and they haven't been. Unfortunately, obviously more pressure's been put on them because the Ducks don't have a true top 6 forwards really playing night in and night out. But it's a problem. You've got these star players on defense, and nothing's getting done. I mean, they're not quite, living up to it. I mean, you see the little things here and there. I mean, Montour scoring goals and Manson scoring goals, things like that. They're helping to add on the offense here and there. But like you said, defensively, it's been a little bit lacking, unfortunately. And it was just really evident in this last game. The Ducks played Chicago, basically just got blown out in the first period. If you didn't watch the rest of the game, I don't blame you. But the Ducks got smoked. I mean, that's just the way to put it. They gave up 3 goals in the first period. They eventually got down 4-0. Gibson got pulled. They brought in Miller, but then Miller gave up 3 goals, and the Ducks ended up dropping this one 7-3. And again, Raquel didn't play in this game. He didn't travel with the team, and I mean, there's just nothing I can say. The Ducks just did not look good in this game at all, Eddie. They just could not handle the forecheck and the speed of the Blackhawks.
Yeah. And, one thing that I brought up in the game against Vegas is that Vegas skated the Ducks into the ground. in the third period, and Chicago did that all game against the Ducks here. They had no match for Chicago's speed in this one, and it showed. And the injuries showed, and the inexperience at times showed by the Ducks as well. And it's a tough one to swallow. It wasn't a great week, but it was 2-2-1 isn't awful, especially again with all the injuries. It's going to be a theme. We mention every week the amount of injuries they have, but when you can come out of week 2-1 and get some points, it's fine. But this is a real slap in the face for the Ducks in this one, and it wasn't Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves who took advantage of the Ducks tonight. It was a young rookie in Alex DeBrincat who really took it to the Ducks and had a hat trick and 4 points in this one. And nothing really good came of this. Yeah, the Ducks scored 3 goals. Chris Wagner had 2 of them, but it was just a very poor effort. Goaltending wasn't great in this one. The forwards got outmatched, and the defense, again, is supposed to be 100% healthy, were completely outmatched and just looked lost in this one.
Yeah, you really got to it. There's nothing, you can't really sugarcoat this game. I mean, you look at everything, the Ducks did not look good, and offense, defense, or net, all the way around. That's just the way it is. I'm not going to sit here and play the homer card because they got beat. I mean, obviously the injuries and all that stuff we've talked about, but still, they didn't come out to play. And matters got worse too. Brandon Montour got hit in the boards. Looked like he hurt maybe his right hand or his wrist or both, something like that. He left the game. They didn't give any update, at least right after the game. It sounded like they said he was feeling okay, but we'll have to wait and see. It brings up a question about the lineups. Who knows what the Ducks are going to do now? You have Boschman and Bieksa. Obviously, they've kind of gone back and forth. So they'll probably both play. That'll be, you'll fill out your bottom 6, and then Holzer probably plays forward until the Ducks can get something figured out with the rest of the players. But I just think it's just tough with this team trying to put together a lineup that can even compete. Because, like you said, the Ducks are barely rolling the fourth line, and I don't know. It's just nothing's just working really for this team in these last couple games. Unfortunately, I mean they did okay against the Kings, but like we've seen in the game against Vegas and the Jets and now the Blackhawks, they're just getting dominated, and it's just frustrating at times. And I think everybody feels the same way. You're trying to compete with a depleted squad, and then you're playing teams that those 3 teams are the best arguably in the Western Conference. Right now Vegas and the Kings, of course, in the Pacific. Chicago's up there in the Central. There's a couple other teams, of course, but those are some top teams that are competing, and they've talked about it. It's going to be a struggle for the Ducks on this road trip, Eddie. It doesn't get any easier. They're going to face a St. Louis team. They're going to face a Nashville team. I don't want to be gloom and doom, but after what happened tonight, you hope that they rebound and get their act together on this road trip. But like we said, without Getzlaf, Eves, Kessler, and Raquel now on offense, it's going to be a tough road trip for them to finish up here.
Yeah, and it can't really get more daunting than the next 3 games on the road here. I mean, the next game is against St. Louis, who are the best team in the Western Conference right now, and they have arguably the best trio, the best line in the NHL right now, in Braden Shen, Jaden Schwartz, and Vladimir Tarasenko. And after this game, going into that game in a couple of days' time, you're not looking too optimistic in having to face that line. And they have a lot of other scoring threats that can get you other than just those 3. But they've been dominant this season, and I'm definitely not looking forward to that game coming up. But it doesn't get easier. You've got Columbus in the game after that, and again, they're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference right now, and arguably have the best goaltender in the NHL right now in Sergei Bobrovsky. And then you've got a back-to-back where you face Nashville the next day, and they're one of the best home teams in the NHL at 8-1-1. So it's tough to feel optimistic about the next few games, and really it's like that until Christmas. The Ducks play 10 of their next 13 games on the road. Pretty much all of them are against teams currently holding a playoff spot. And then their 3 home games are against Ottawa, Minnesota, and Carolina, which aren't really that much easier either. So, if the guys aren't coming back, to if Getzlaf isn't coming back, if Kessler's not going to be back, if we don't know about Raquel, but most likely Eves isn't gonna be back. Where are the Ducks gonna pick up wins? This is the hardest point of their schedule so far, and this is the weakest we've seen the team.
Yeah, I think this week. We can throw the Chicago game already out the boat. I didn't think they'd win tonight, anyways, but not like this. But looking at these games, I'm hoping the next three they at least can pull out maybe 2 points. I just got to be honest. If they pull out 3 or 4, I think we'd all do a happy dance. But if they can at least get 2, and I know it's not great, 2 out of 6, but that's just the reality of what we're looking at right now. These teams that they're going to have to play, the players that are out. And, as far as the updates go on the injuries, you touched on it a little bit. Kessler, as far as we know, it's not still going to be until close to Christmas time. Getzlaf is the same. His prognosis was 2 months. Sounds like it's going to be the same as well. Raquel, we have no idea what's going on. They just said upper body injury, and they're keeping a tight lip on him. We hope he'll be back soon. And then, of course, Eves, who knows? We don't know if he'll even be back at all. It's just with that crazy disease, nobody really knows what's going to happen. So, we don't mean to be gloom and doom, but there's a lot of stuff going on with this team. And for them to try and make this push is going to be tough until they get these players back, which kind of leads to some of the fan questions we had too, Eddie. People talked about this before, but one of them is, what do you think about the Ducks' chances to make the playoffs as a wild card team? Matt asked that, and I still think the Ducks have a chance to make it as a wild card team. I don't think they're so out of it that they're going to get smoked. But you and I talked about this, before the show, and kind of it's kind of weird, but our expectations of the Ducks, or at least what we think they'll do, depending upon where they're at the end of December. If this team is playing very, very poorly and they're still, sub 500 team, it may sound weird to some of you, and you want them to make the playoffs, you want them to do well, but if they're only going to get in there and squeeze in there, you'd be happy, and maybe they can make it and make a run. But if they're not 100% healthy and they're having all these issues, I'm not saying that you want them to tank, but you might not want them to make the playoffs and try and get a higher pick or something. But I don't know. What do you think, Eddie? With this team, do you think they make the playoffs as a wild card, or do you even want them to make the playoffs as a wild card?
It's tough to look at right now. Unless front office steps in and makes some changes, this could get ugly in the next 13 games here, and we could be looking at a record and a hole that the Ducks have dug themselves that it's impossible to get out of and get back in the race. We just talked about how hard this next upcoming schedule is going to be up until Christmas, and where the wins going to come from, and who in the lineup is going to get you those wins other than John Gibson, and really it's tough for him to come in night out and play the way he's been playing. We saw that tonight. This has been arguably his first off game of the season, and the Ducks just got completely blown out. But you don't really know where things are going to come from. If you look at come Christmas, if they're still around 500 and guys are starting to come back healthy, then maybe there's a chance to squeeze in. And if they can get into the playoffs, then fine. I want them to make the playoffs. I think any team who gets into the playoffs has a chance, and especially if the Ducks are 100% healthy. They've got Getzlaf, they've got Kessler. Maybe not Eves, because we have no idea what his status is going to be. But at least if everybody but Eves is 100%, and they can start getting on a roll and maybe add a piece or two at the deadline, and then if they can get in the playoffs, anything can happen. But I would rather the Ducks finish lower than to just miss out on the playoffs. And I think it's a question, again, we probably have to revisit after a little bit, maybe farther down this road trip, or just after it, right before Christmas, and look at what their record is. But if they're still continuing to play poorly and they're sub 500 come that time, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to fight for a playoff spot, especially with some of the way these teams are playing currently.
Yeah, you said it too. If they're going to miss, you don't want them to just barely miss the playoffs. Like you said, they're not going to have a high pick. Not saying you want them to tank, but we're just saying if for some reason they get in that situation where they're trying to scrap and, they're in the bottom trying to get into that top 8 and they're not going to make it. It's still early. We still got things to, look at, and we hope, for Christmas Santa brings all the Ducks fans a healthy team. That's what we're hoping for. I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're looking to hopefully get Getzlaf and Kessler back around Christmas time. Hopefully Raquel before then. And like you said, Eves is a big question mark. So that's what we're kind of looking at, with the team right now. Some people talked about trades and stuff like that. Some of the fan questions we had asked. The biggest thing I heard lately, and again, it's not official or anything, but if someone's going to get traded, Vatanin's name has come up again. And that's come from some people that work for the Ducks. So not saying that that's official, but that's something that's out there. I think we've talked about it before. If the Ducks would trade him and go, get some kind of forward. So, it may not happen right now, maybe closer to the trade deadline, but I mean, we're almost into December. The trade deadline's not really that far away. So I would keep an eye on Vatanen and seeing if the Ducks do something, Eddie. We kind of talked about some of the players out there, too, that they might trade for, and maybe they will do something, especially with the Getzlaf now out for a little while, too.
Yeah, I think the question comes down to really who's available. And I haven't really heard anything. Galchenyuk's name has kind of gone to the wayside. We really haven't heard anything about him lately, and it's almost about time for front office to step in and make something happen. I mean, the Ducks just can't sit by here and try and coast by with the team they have. It's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to continue to grind out wins with the lineup they currently have, especially with Raquel going out. We don't know how long he's going to be out for now as well. I mean, realistically, if they go into St. Louis, Columbus, and Nashville and lose all 3 games, how do you not try and make something happen? It's tough because we don't really know who's available, and I don't know what kind of deals can be made at this point, especially any deals involving Sami Vatanen. You'd have to be looking at teams, if they're going to move a top forward, that either have a spare top forward to move, or is a team that is pretty much resigned to missing the playoffs. And again, it's very early to start looking at that. You might look at teams like Arizona, but they don't really have any pieces they can move. They're one of the youngest teams in NHL, and their forward group is pretty much a bunch of those young forwards. You look at Edmonton, and I think that organization still believes that they can make a push for the playoffs, especially when you've got Connor McDavid on your team. It's hard not to believe that. And then you look at the Eastern Conference, you maybe see a team like Buffalo and them possibly moving Evander Kane, but I'm sure they would like to keep on holding on to him as long as they can and see his value rise come trade deadline day. But, I don't know. The trades are tough right now, and eventually the Ducks front office has got to step in and make something happen.
Yeah, and if they don't now, like we said, the trade deadline's coming up, so something's got to give, especially with all the the forwards that they have, the top 6 type forwards that are gone. So the Ducks are going to have to keep piling through, and they've been relying on a lot of players from the Gulls, Eddie, to come up, and one of them that made the news this last week and kind of was the center of controversy was Michael Liambas. He was brought up. Obviously, we've seen him get into a lot of fights in the 1 week. Basically, he's been with the Ducks. Hasn't skated a lot, but he came up in the Hockey News website. Basically, Ken Campbell wrote a article. If you know about Ken, he's really big on fighting. No, he's really anti on fighting, and he's anti-goon and all that kind of stuff in hockey. And he decided to write an article about Liambas, saying that he had no business being in the NHL, which sparked a few other people to do some comments on Twitter, and then it just went crazy out of there. And it was a big thing. We even had one of our writers, Richard. It was kind of funny. He had written an article about Liambas when he had come up and only played in the first couple of games, and we kind of held that article for a little bit because we were just going to publish it like later in the week, and then all the stuff unfolded, and then of course as you saw, we had that article published. So I thought it was interesting, the stuff that happened with Ken Campbell, but he's not really a fan favorite amongst the Ducks fans, Eddie, because I don't know why he targeted only Liambas in this. I mean, there are a few other guys, McDermott on the Kings, for example. There's some players out there that have similar roles. I don't know if he just hates the Ducks or what, but what did you think about his article? It's kind of interesting. It sparked a lot of talking amongst the hockey fans, especially Duck fans.
Yeah, and I'm among one of the people that believes that role as an enforcer really no longer has a place in the NHL. And it's slowly making its way out. But there's a time and a place, and there's a right way to go about dealing with it and writing an article relating to it. And one way is definitely not targeting a single player and saying that they have no business being in the National Hockey League. I think that's it's a really bad way to go about it. And yes, Liambas is an enforcer. Yes, he probably doesn't really have any other traits to for any reason for the Ducks to call him up. But you don't have to go out and publicly hate on the guy for it. He's in the NHL. He's paid his dues. He's gotten to where he is by hard work and effort. And to really target him for the way he plays, it's really disappointing and just, in my opinion, poor journalism. And I don't really have any leg to stand on to really come in and hit on a guy like Ken Campbell. But when you're kind of coming in but from behind on a player like that, it's tough to support.
Yeah, I just don't understand. I mean, he could have just talked about it in a general sense and talked about enforcers and quote unquote goons and how the league doesn't want to fight as much and have these injuries and all. I don't know. I just thought he could have written something similar, taking a different angle. And it seems like the other thing a lot of people were upset about was not only was it more aimed as like almost a personal attack towards Liambas, but when you read that article, if you did read the article, there wasn't a whole lot of substance to it. I mean, he talked about little small things here or there, but he didn't really justify his point, which a lot of people were saying it was clickbait and things like that. But I guess his mission was accomplished, Eddie, if he did want people to click on it and go to the Hockey News website and spark this debate, because it got a lot of attention. So I guess in that regard, he got what he wanted. But like you said, I just don't agree with the means of the way he did it. I don't know. I just thought it was poor taste for, just to keep it simple. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a right way and a wrong way about going to deal with it. And if you publish an article saying how you don't think enforcers have a role in the game anymore, and you think the game's changing, and it's time for that role to pretty much disappear from the NHL, then fine, that's fine. It's an informative piece. You have an opinion, but when you're calling out a specific player and saying that they have no place in the NHL, I mean, like you said, it's distasteful, and it's really unprofessional to just target a guy like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Liambas dated his daughter or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Ken has a daughter, but I'm just saying. I don't know. There's something. Maybe something happened. Something personal or something. I just don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't quote me on that. But it's just kind of really weird. So that came out. That was a big topic during this last week. Obviously, we talked about a few other things that came out this week. Another one. Couple related things that happened this week. Obviously, the big stuff. There was the whole Kings thing. If you love Bailey or maybe you hate Bailey, depends on where you feel. He's edgy. He posts all kinds of humorous type tweets, and also some that maybe aren't so humorous to you as well. But the Kings got in trouble recently this week. The guy Tim Smith that dresses up as Bailey allegedly pinched another employee's butt. And basically that employee complained. And that employee got fired because Smith's wife is the head of HR. And so this other employee complained to her, and it just ended up being a big mess. And this whole, of course, as you all know, the sexual harassment stuff that's going on, especially in Hollywood, unfortunately, all the stories coming out and things like that. I mean, this happened way earlier in the year, but it's just kind of interesting. It came out, and I know the Ducks are pretty sensitive about Wild Wing because they don't even have a Wild Wing Twitter account. There is one out there that, we actually like, but it's not the official one. So I don't know. I just don't know if it's legit or not, because the thing is the timing of it. It's coming out. I'm not defending the Kings, don't get me wrong, but the timing of it's kind of weird, Eddie, because, it's coming out now, but it was like 10, 11 months ago. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting, but it's something to keep your eye on because it's been a big thing in the news lately.
Yeah, and it was funny because we were talking about this before the show, and I hadn't even heard about this before. Even I mean, the fact that it's 11 months old, I hadn't even heard about it, and now it's just coming out now. But yeah, I mean, it's a serious situation, especially we'll talk about the Kessler video upcoming in a little bit, but it's a hot topic right now, and I think that's a reason why it's kind of coming out when it is rather than 10 11 months ago when it happened. But it's something that they're gonna have to deal with, and really it's disappointing. It's kind of a weird story, like you said, with the fact that his wife is the head of HR, and she ends up firing the guy who he allegedly sexually assaulted. So it's worth keeping an eye on and seeing how it all pans out.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have anything further on it. Maybe it'll just die down and go away. I mean, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just, because you see Bailey in there, he does a lot of crazy tweets and whatnot. So when I kind of heard it, I'm like, well, maybe it's legit. But then you see the timing of it. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe there's more to it. Who knows? Maybe the guy was doing a bad job and got fired for something else, and that's why he's using that as an scapegoat. I mean, I don't know. I'm just making it up. But that came out. So it kind of goes along the same story. We know how the Kings are very edgy in their social media in general. The team is, Bailey is. We've seen the Vegas Knights now. They're doing all their stuff, and everybody loves their social media. And pretty much everybody thinks that they're one of the best, if not the best, in the NHL doing that. So the NHL this past week, they had their 100th birthday, basically. And the Ducks did a video. And it created all kinds of controversy. The Ducks did a short 30-second video. It's Ryan Kessler. He's got his waist area blacked out. He was wearing, I don't know if it was black underwear, black shorts, or something like that. He actually was wearing something. He wasn't completely naked, but it was like a black rectangle or square around that area. And he walked through some of the offices at the Ducks. And it was a pretty funny video when it came out. And then it went south really quick, Eddie. A lot of people complained. There's a couple different angles we'll take on this. We'll talk about. But just your initial thoughts. What did you think? I mean, a lot of people thought it was funny. Some people thought it was offensive. It ended up getting deleted. It just ended up being a crazy, I guess a kind of a PR nightmare. A lot of people, didn't think it was. We ran a poll question. About 90% didn't think there was an issue, or at least thought it was funny. It's just weird because it seemed like the Ducks were trying to be a little bit more edgy like the Kings and some of these other teams, and it ended up kind of backfiring.
Yeah, and I think to start, I would say the video probably had a lot of potential to be funny. And I'm not saying it wasn't funny, but it definitely wasn't hilarious. It was a good video. It had potential. The timing, I think, is the big thing. And then that's what a lot of people hit on, the timing of the release of the video. The fact that he was walking through an office in front of employees, seemingly naked, and in front of female employees is what the real issue is with all the sexual harassment and sexual assault things coming out in Hollywood, like we mentioned. The timing is very poor. They didn't really pay any attention to when they were releasing the video. In my opinion, and I saw a lot of people talk about this too, the video is probably filmed beforehand in preparation for that date, and then they didn't really look back and check into what was happening, and the video was just released. And there's a lot of conflicting views. A lot of people don't think it's an issue, and people are easily offended. Some people are obviously offended by the video, and they were for getting it taken down. And there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think the Ducks did the right thing by taking the video down. I understand where both sides are coming from. I understand why people could be offended by the video, and I understand why people are mad that others are offended by the video. But, in the end, it all comes down to the fact that, yes, it was poor timing by the Ducks. Some people believe it was funny, but, there's a time and a place for stuff like that, and you have to understand the situation that you're submitting a video like that to.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue. I think nobody disagrees as far as whether it was, funny or hilarious. Maybe some thought it was more funny, than others or whatever. Everybody, got some kind of humor out of it, no matter what level you got that humor out of. Maybe it was a little bit, maybe it was a lot. That didn't really seem to be the issue. I think the issue more so was the timing, and that's what the people in the poll question that were happy that it was deleted. There's about 10% of you out there that said, "Hey, it needs to be, deleted." Glad that it was, and it comes down to the fact that you have all this stuff going on in the Hollywood industry, and then you have Kessler walking around in the business environment where nothing. And I know some of you are out there going, "Well, that's not a big deal." I get it. I didn't think it was that big of a deal either, but people are upset because of the other stuff going on. I don't think the video alludes to any kind of sexual harassment at all. It's just like some of you said, hashtag too soon. Maybe it just was a little bit too soon, and they had the video probably planned in advance too, like you talked about, Eddie. It's not something they just did the night before. At least not. It's not what I heard. It was at least done somewhat in advance. But I think that's the big issue, and the problem after that is then what do you do? How do you handle that? Because we've seen ourselves in situations where we posted things, nothing crazy like that. Like we're not having a naked podcast or anything crazy. We don't do anything that nuts. But I mean, there's been times that we posted certain things, and I've seen people get upset. And the way that we usually resolve it is we usually just delete whatever it is. It doesn't happen that often. It's not to the level of this, of course, but that's the way we resolved it, and that's what the Ducks did. They deleted it. And I think that was the right course of action because so many people got all crazy about it. It's mainly on Twitter's where you saw a lot of people get upset. And you know how much we love Twitter because people like to hide on there and then throw darts at everybody and try to one-up people and grammar police people. The people on Twitter, the ones that want to do those kind of things, they just crack me up. And that's why we usually don't even respond anymore like we used to in the beginning. We even changed the way we do social media now because of things like that. And I think maybe if the Ducks would have chose a different forum or a different timing, like you talked about, it could have been a little bit better. I know some people were upset that they deleted it, but you know what? A lot of people downloaded the video. There's apps for that now. There's websites for that now. It's posted all over the place. So it's still out there. It's not like it went away. And we talked about this before the show. One of my buddies that helped me with social media stuff, back when we started this whole Ducks thing, is said that when you make a post, you still fire that missile, and the missile's still been fired because people screenshot stuff, which I did something similar to that a little while ago and posted something, someone screenshot it and sent it to other people, and it wasn't supposed to be like that. And, unfortunately, you have to be careful with the way you post things and realize that even though once you delete it, it's out there. Because the Ducks did leave it up there for several hours, and I know a lot of people downloaded it and then reposted it in other places. So it was already out there. I mean, it's probably good that they deleted it, but I mean, they deleted it, but it's still flying out there anyways, Eddie. So, I don't know. I honestly was surprised that they even posted something like this to begin with. When I first saw it, I thought it was very funny, and I was just shocked that they even did it because usually they don't do things like this. So I don't know if they're just trying to be a Vegas Knights social media or a Kings type media, and it kind of backfired. But it just goes all back to what you said. It's about the timing, and I think that's what ended up being the big issue for some people.
Yeah, and I think you're right in the fact that I don't think there was any intention to portray the video in that kind of way from the Ducks. There definitely was an issue with timing, and I think it would have been smarter for them to look at the situation and maybe table that video for down the road. I mean, yes, it was made for the NHL's birthday, but that's something that if you believed that something like this could have happened, then maybe table that for later for a different event, for a birthday, for a player, whatever, or just don't even use it. And there were plenty of teams who put out simple things like pictures and stuff like that, and I get that they're trying to take a different angle on it, but you gotta understand the timing and the climate of the situation, and maybe if you think something like this could happen, then avoid it. But one thing you have to look at too is I think Twitter is a place where, like you said, a lot of people can express their opinions, and sometimes it gets out of hand. And I think what a lot of people have to remember too is, people have the right to be offended if they want to, just like people have the right to say that it shouldn't offend people and get mad about it. A lot of comments I saw saying, people are too soft, and I hate how I hate how this country is today, and you can't. You can't. Everybody's easily offended by everything, and I think you have to remember that the fact is, people have the right to feel however they want about the video, and I don't think people should be belittled about being offended by the video. I think if you like the video, fine. If you don't like the video, fine. But I don't think you should belittle people who do like it or who don't like it. And unfortunately, I saw a lot of that on Twitter. A lot of people saying, people are way too easily offended. A lot of people saying anybody who liked the video was a bad person. And again, that comes with the territory in Twitter. But it was very, that was, to me, that was one of the most unfortunate things to see is a lot of people split.
Yeah, and we've seen that too on other things. When you post certain things, it's just weird. There's times that you post things. I remember one, for example, we did where that kind of happened, Eddie, is we had a T-shirt idea, and it was Make America, or no, I'm sorry, it was Make Anaheim Great Again. And people got pissed off at me. They were like, "You're a Trump supporter, and screw you," and all stuff. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, time out, people. I've just taken a slogan and twisting it, in another way, and people got all pissed off. And if you remember, people got pissed at Peros too, because Peros was like, "Oh, I like Trump, and make hockey violent again." And I saw people on Twitter saying, "Well, I'm not going to buy your stuff anymore, and screw you, Peros," and all this kind of stuff. I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God!" Like, it's just tough. I get it. Like, if that offended you, like this video offended you, or people taking a slogan, which happened to be a Trump slogan, and turning it into something for hockey, and that's what they were doing. Well, they're doing it for hockey. I mean, it wasn't necessary to support Trump, but of course that's a huge topic too, and people get upset over that and turn it into different things. And it's unfortunate because obviously we never made the T-shirt. And why didn't we? Because people got all upset and got all mad and all this stuff, and it just wasn't worth it at that point. It was like, well, who cares? I mean, we do it for fun anyways. We don't make a bunch of money off T-shirts. It's just for fun. And I think that was what was kind of unfortunate with this, like you said, is they did a video that was meant to be lighthearted. It was meant to be funny. And then instead of people basically arguing, that it was funny and appropriate and all these kind of things, is then you had people turning on each other saying that, hey, if you like the video, then you support sexual harassment. Or if you're offended by the video, then, you're a sensitive, what. You know what I mean? And I think that was the sad part of it. And we've seen that on other things on our end. I've seen it on other ends from other people getting lambasted with things like that. And I think that's the part that's the unfortunate thing, is then it spills over from now. We're not just arguing about the content of the video, but now we're arguing about other people's opinions and labeling them something just because they thought something was funny or something wasn't. I mean, like you said, if you have an opinion one way or another about it, I mean, that's your opinion. I mean, that is what it is. I just think the big issue is when it gets taken away from the main point and dragged into something else. It's just unfortunate because that was never what it was intended to do, and maybe that's why they deleted it, because it turned into that, and you see people arguing back and forth and going at it. And I've seen that before a lot too, on other social medias, and I've had stuff where I've had to mediate comments from people, and I've had people come and complain to me because I'll post something that's completely neutral, but two people get in an argument about it, and it's all because they hate each other's opinion. And it's just tough. I think that's the part where it got blown out of proportion, Eddie, like you talked about.
Yeah, and I think in the end, it was good on the Ducks for removing it. Ultimately they issued an apology if it offended anybody. So I think they handled it pretty well in the end. Unfortunately, all of this most likely could have been avoided if the video wasn't put out in the first place, and if they had have understood the timing. But it comes with the territory when you're in social media. You never know how people are going to react to certain things. Even if you do all the research and you think the timing is fine, you don't think anything's going to happen. There's always things that can go wrong, and unfortunately in this case it went wrong. I think the Ducks handled it pretty well. Most of it seemed to blow over right now, but that's the nature of Twitter. The moment something gets posted, everybody can see it, and everybody's ready to comment on it. So unfortunately that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, you're right. And I think the best thing to take away from this is not whether or not you thought the video was funny or not. I think the thing to take away is when you see something posted and someone has a different opinion than yours, it's fine to disagree, but there's no need to go on there and trash other people's opinions. Not everybody's going to agree with each other. That's like part of the human race. Like, we don't all agree. I mean, that's why some of the best ideas, go forward, because someone comes up with something new and we go, and then other times someone comes with something and we shoot it down, but then it helps us, build and go forward. So I think that's the part that we just got to all learn. Is just respect other people's opinions. Maybe you don't agree. That's fine. You don't have to agree. But when you see all this, and that's what I saw on there on the Ducks feed, is people just going back and forth. And that's why we didn't even comment. You notice we stayed out of it. We didn't post anything until it was all said and done. It was deleted. Then we put up the poll question just to kind of see. We were kind of curious to see what people thought. Obviously, a majority of you thought it wasn't a problem. But, just be nice to each other on social media, okay? Just get over it. Someone has a different opinion. It's not the end of the world. So, anyways, with that, going on and on about all these things that happened, we had all these topics, Liambas and Bailey and the Kessler video and all this, the Ducks and their 500 billion injuries. They're going to keep on pushing. We'll see what happens. Obviously, it's going to be tough, like we talked about. We did have a watch party, when they played the Kings. That was a lot of fun. Pretty much a packed house. We're going to try and do another one of those. I'll let you guys know when that date comes up. We're also selling a lot of the T-shirts at discounted prices. There was Black Friday, there's Cyber Monday, all that stuff. We're just kind of doing a big sale. Orange and Black Friday sale was part of what we called it. But if you go on tpnhockey.com, a lot of the shirts are $5. So check it out. We're trying to get those sold on there and hopefully get some new designs going. So look for that. We appreciate all the fan questions. We appreciate you listening to the show. We're going to be super cautiously optimistic with this team with all the injuries, and obviously we'll post more news as it comes along. So with that, I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Look forward to the holidays coming up. And like I said, be good to each other. Be kind to each other. If you disagree, that's fine, but don't let it get to you, okay? Have a good week. We'll be back. We'll talk about the Ducks. Hopefully they can survive all these injuries, and let's go Ducks.